Hello everyone, this is Martin from AthenaStudies and this is the third knowledge clips of the weekly series that I'm providing to you to help you with the writing assignment for the Principles of Economics and Business 1. This week we're going to talk about your fourth week essay assignment and as you know my videos have very similar content. So firstly I'm going to start off with some writing tips and we're going to discuss something extremely important, which is academia and mainly paraphrasing. Next week, we're going to move on to writing. And if you want to have more information about how you can properly cite and use the APA format, please refer to the first two videos that you can find in this YouTube channel. Then this week you have to write about Porter and his five forces and his article How Competitive Forces Shape Strategy, but we're going to talk about that later in this video. So firstly, academia is extremely important because academia lists all the requirements you have to basically meet when you have a writing assignment that is for an academic institution. So paraphrasing is the focus that we are going to deal with today. However, paraphrasing comes after something that's way more significant and actually should be avoided at all costs, and that's plagiarism. So plagiarism is when you copy somebody's work and you present it as your own. And you shouldn't do this because if you plagiarize, then your work becomes not reliable. And the thing is that others can check sources and also teachers can check these sources, and there are these special plagiarism platforms and softwares that actually are implemented on Canvas. So every time you submit an assignment, it tells the teacher how much plagiarism you have in your paper. Then your sources, the sources you use, have authority over your work, because what it is happening is that actually academic writing contributes to filling the gaps in the existing literature. So it is important that there is cohesion between your work and the previous work that's been done by different writers or researchers. So what you actually do when you write a paper, you present your ideas through somebody else's viewpoint so that you add on to what's already existing. Then you can skip plagiarizing and avoid it if you do not use direct citations. So you shouldn't use by any means the copy-paste function. Be sure that everything you use is in your own words. So reference everything that is not common knowledge and keep in mind that this is almost everything that you write about, because common knowledge does deal with like the weather or whatever. It's really something that you know from personal experience. When you write about Porter's forces, it's not something that's going to be on top of your brain. So this is why you would need to reference it every time you use his name. And in order to avoid plagiarism, you can paraphrase literature or other sources you are using. So now we are going to dig into the more specifics into actually into the methodology of paraphrasing. So what you can do is that you can detect keywords and write them down on a separate sheet of paper. Then you are going to put away the original text because you don't want to be influenced by it when you are writing your text, your paraphrase basically, and then you are going to link the keywords and you are going to write down the information in your own words. Then you're going to go back to the initial text in order to check whether actually you've missed something or not. And finally, of course, you're going to add a reference in the form of both an in-text citation I discussed in the second video, and also a reference entry, which also you can find in the second video of this series. So now we're going to have a short example so that I show you how exactly you can properly paraphrase. So here we have this excerpt. It's taken for Wikipedia, but it's taken for the reasons of just finding out what paraphrasing is. So Wikipedia, as you know, is not a credible source, so you're not supposed to be using it. But here the text goes. Amsterdam was founded at the Amstel that was dammed to control flooding. Originating as a small fishing village in the late 12th century, it became one of the most important ports in the world during the Dutch Golden Age and became the leading center for finance and trade. As you see, founded at the Amstel fishing village, most important ports in the world, and finance and trade are highlighted in yellow because these are the keywords that we are going to use in order to make our paraphrase. So when you're doing it on paper or in your laptop, what you should do now is just hide what the original text is and write a paraphrase using these four key phrases. And the paraphrase would go the following way. So Amsterdam was initially a fishing village at the Amstel that turned into a significant port worldwide and a financial trading center. So basically you see that we've shortened the entire information, we've used only what's important, we've added the in-text citation at the end so that the entire paraphrase is credible, and because it's not my own words, then you need to do this so that you don't plagiarize. And then at the end of the day you see that actually a paraphrase may even sound better than the original text, because you see in the original text there are a lot of skipped spots. There is even the squared brackets, which is it inside, and when you use this, basically you want to change the original text into something else that is coherent with the writing. Now we are going to move on to Michael Porter's 5 forces, and I'm going to go over through every of the forces so that you know what exactly you would need to discuss in your paper. So there are these 5 forces: a threat of new entrants, bargaining power of customers or buyers, threat of substitute products or services, bargaining power of suppliers, and then the industry that's staying in the middle, and it is the driving force of everything. So firstly, threat of new entrants. So in order to decrease the threat of new entrants, there are these barriers to entry that companies inside an industry can actually implement. So if they have economies of scale, so if like somebody has a very high volume production, then it would be very hard for a new company to be able to implement this into their own operations. Then product differentiation is crucial as well, because if one company is producing unique services and unique products, then it would be very hard for another one to copy this and to implement it in their own production. Then capital requirements. Sometimes it is that you need to pay in advance a very big price cost in order to be able to enter an industry, or it can be about cost disadvantages independent of scale. So it can be about like loyalty or something else that the customers have already acquired. It does not need to be full-on cost, it can be implicit cost, indirect cost, but the importance is that it is going to actually prevent the new company from entering the market. Then access to the distribution channels is also extremely important, because so the companies that are already inside the business, inside the industry, they already have acquired some very important distribution channels. So if a new company comes in, the already existing distributors may not be able to also serve the new company, or there can be government policy that is also that can be preventing the entrants from going into a new industry. Then the bargaining power of customers. So a buyer group is powerful if it is concentrated or there are large volume purchases. So like if somebody outside the company, there are a lot of people and they buy a lot of products, then the company does not have a say. It is the people who are going to decide for what the prices are going to be and how everything is going to look like. And then if the products that the customers buy from the industry are standard or represent only a portion of what there is of a potential for these products, then it is that actually the company does not have a lot of power, because the power is in the buyers. Since they are not getting high quality and differentiated products, they actually need to, they can very easily switch to someone else or just be influencing the pricing of the products to a great extent. So if the buyer group is earning low profits, then they would not be able to pay for the product. So that's another reason why pricing can fall down. Then I already mentioned that the product may be unimportant to the quality, which may mean that the buyer can switch to another company, which means that they have a strong bargaining power. And then there may be a credible threat to backward integration. As you should have learned already, you know that there is backward and forward integration, which deals with vertical integration. So when you have a buyer, there is a threat to backward integration because it may be that the buyers do not actually want to integrate with the company. And when you have a supplier group, it may be the complete opposite. So there may be a threat to forward integration. So the supplier group is dominated by a few companies, then it is actually powerful. So if there are a few companies inside a supplier, like in this industry, then the actual company in the industry does not have a lot of power. Then if the supplier group sells something unique or differentiated, also the company would not have a lot of power and they wouldn't have a say into what the prices will be, what the cost will be, and all of these things. So this is basically everything that you need to know about the supplier group. And if the industry is not an important customer for the supplier group, then also the supplier group is going to have a lot of power because they would not be as interested in the industry they're supplying. Then there is the last threat, which is the substitute products. So the substitutes that deserve attention are two types. So they can be subject to trends improving their price performance trade-off with the industry's product. So if it is something that is actually very current and it may replace what the company is selling, then that's a threat to the company's operations. And if it's produced by industries earning high profits, it may be also a threat to the company itself, because high profits are always attracting customers, because high profits would mean that actually the company itself is going to lose some market share and it's going to get new customers. Then we move into the last factor, which is the industry staying in the middle. It's jockeying for position among current competitors. And what we need to consider is actually the intense rivalry there may be present when when companies are inside an industry. So intense rivalry may occur if there are numerous competitors. So if the industry is overloaded, basically this would mean that there will be a lot of companies competing for a very small customer base. So if there is slow industry growth, so the industry has been the same, there would still be a lot of rivalry, because since rivalry is existent, growth is impossible. If the industry is providing undifferentiated products, or there are low switching costs, which means the cost of a customer moving from one brand to another brand, then it would mean that there is also intense rivalry, because the companies would be competing for the entire customer base. And high fixed costs would be something else that may create intense rivalry, because companies would want to get into this industry, produce as much as they want in order to reduce the fixed costs per unit, but this may not be possible, which means that rivalry may be increased. And then high exit barriers. There are industries in which actually to leave may be more expensive than staying inside, which is why there are just companies who stay inside and create rivalry among all the other organizations inside this specific industry. And then the last thing you have to consider for your essay is multifaceted rivalry. So there are two aspects that Porter discusses about them. So this is the key to growth and survival. So through multifaceted rivalry, actually you are able to grow and to survive inside an industry. And by multifaceted rivalry, he means that you actually explore different product markets in order to serve people better and to narrow down competition. So now we are moving to the last part of the video, which is the writing assignment. So the writing assignment for this week is the following. Porter assumes that successful performance comes from dealing smartly with external factors. A company is not always able to influence those factors, but it can position itself well within their competitive force field. As explained above, according to Porter, it is the strategist's job to find an optimal fit between the business and the environment. And this is something that you would need to address in your essay. So a fit between the business and the environment, how opportunities are found for a company to go into a specific industry. Then, in the article you have read, Porter did not describe how this assessment should be done. What kind of information do we need, and on what basis of which criteria do we decide whether a threat is high, medium, or low? So you will actually need to discuss how we can evaluate a threat. So is it actually severe, is it medium, or is it to be ignored, is it not as relevant? And then arguably the ways in which to best do competitive assessments of Porter's kind change over time and are now quite different from what they were in 1979 when the article was published. The question even is whether Porter's explanation is still useful. So you will need to evaluate to what extent Porter's ideas still hold true. And then you can do this through the spectrum of Uber, Facebook, eBay, Amazon, or Groupon. So you are going to choose one of these companies and you are going to evaluate whether Porter's ideas that we've just explained about his 5 forces can be implemented into these companies and what actually they bear as threats in their industries. So in your introduction, what you would need to do is to briefly explain what the Porter's 5 forces model is and why it is relevant. So you would need to just restate briefly what I've just said. Then you would need to discuss if Porter's work is still applicable to internet companies, and you would need to focus on 2 main things: the threat of new entrants and buyer or supplier power. So these are the focuses of your essay. You choose either buyer or supplier power, not both of them. And then you are going to have like an exemplary thesis would be the essay will examine whether Uber faces threats of new entrants or bargaining power as discussed in Porter's work. And then you are going to have the so-called framework, which may be like a very little paragraph, and then 3 contrasting body paragraphs. So what you need to do in the framework is to summarize the threat of new entry and the buyer or supplier power. And then in the 3 body paragraphs, what you're going to do is you're going to argue whether Porter's work is specific enough and whether it can be used today in today's strategy formulation and implementation. And you would need to be critical by literally having stand against and in favor to what your thesis is. So you would need to provide both sides. If you're, for example, discussing Uber, you would need to have arguments in favor and against why Porter's work is still relevant today. So thank you very much for watching. And until next week, when we're going to talk about Walter Bagehot. And just a heads up, sign up for AthenaStudies course for the week 6 essay, which is going to be on Keynes, and you're going to get a lot of extra help and personal feedback on your paper. So thank you very much for watching and see you next week.